Hey Bodgers, we've had a special invite, me and him. We're here to see the unveiling of, what's the word? Monument?
Memorial?
A memorial thing that's being built. And it's going down Newton on Disney or somewhere, A47, A46, down that way somewhere. Stand's been up since 2019, I've just been informed. And what it's going to have on it is that big old lump. It's also going to be skinned. I think it's going to look like a lank by the time it's done. But yeah, 1-to-1 scale, I guess, isn't it? Heck of a thing. We'll have to look up that designation, see what that's about. But yeah, so we've got a special invite, the two of us, to hang on, let's get you in the light. So we've got an invite, we've come down. Nice way to spend a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. There might be something flying over later, but he's going to try and get footage of that. Try. So anyway, there we go. That's what we've got going on, and I'll come back if there's anything else interesting going on. We'll go and have a look at our friend Andy over there, see what he's got going on, and yeah. Right folks, we'll get a closer look at this baby, shall we? You get in? Yeah, well, there you go. Just kind of give you the idea of scale of a lank. Prefer Halifaxes, don't we? Yeah. Prefer Halifaxes, better place.
Next question, why into Halifax?
That's the thing. We might do an Halifax next, who knows? Yeah, why not? Certainly some bloody metalwork gone into it. God knows how many miles of welding coil. Welding wire. Bolted together well. It's some of that fake thing that I like. Fake.
It's not weathered though.
Bad boy, no. She's new bad boy, or is that? Almost looks like a Star Wars thing, doesn't it? With shape of it, seeing as there's no curves to her. And there's a few people here who are you, what are you about, and well, do we tell us all about yourselves?
We're the Bommy County Gateway Trust, running up to the fundraising for the On Freedom's Wings, the project that you've just been filming behind it. We are the team that go out and try and raise enough cash to get this project finished and over the line.
And it's hard work, folks, so I'll leave links in the description. I'll get some of them, and where you can donate and help these lads out. It's important to remember these things, isn't it?
It is very important. Yeah.
So there we go. We'll move on a bit further, shall we? Right, well, the old man, he can't stand it much longer. He's had to go to the loo. Lou's are in the workshop. It's quite the size. Great big gantry crane on there. All the engineering bits seem to have been shoved to the side. I don't know, unless they're all mobile, I guess, to get big projects in. They don't come a lot bigger than a Lancaster, really, do they? But yeah, so that's our workshop. It's Timmins. Timmins fabrication and construction. They do a bit of everything down in Lincolnshire. I'll leave links in the description. But yeah, this is where they put it together. So, moving on.
This model is based on a particular aircraft that took off from an RAF base called RAF Swinderby. The Lancaster statue itself is going to be between Newark and Lincoln on the gateway to Bomber County, as you lot know it as for Lincolnshire. And it's banked as if it's turning in for the final approach into the old RAF Swinderby. RAF Swinderby is now no more an RAF base, it's commercial and industrial. It all though revolves around a particular flight that took place on the 18th and 19th of September in 1942. This is a true story. Some of it does sound a little bit unbelievable, but I'm going to go through what's what. RAF Swinderby opened up as a bomber command airfield in 1940, right at the start. And initially it was the home to 2 Polish squadrons. And then it became the home to RAF 50 Squadron. The new Lancaster bombers, the big heavy bombers, arrived in 1942, just after the concrete runways were put in to take the weight of these huge beasts. 176 aircraft from 50 Squadron were lost during the war. 176 aircraft is a lot. The average crew of a Lancaster bomber was 7. So you start to put your multiples together and you can very quickly see that a lot of people have lost their lives. This is just one squadron, 176 aircraft, one squadron. So the mission that took place on the night of the 18th of September 1942, the Lancaster's serial number was R5689, but for those who are distant looking at a Lancaster bomber, it's the letters down the side you are looking for. So this is VNN, VN for the squadron and then N for the particular plane within that squadron. They'd have had different capital letters, as you can see. And this was painted down the right and the left-hand side of the fuselage. So the flight was 2 aeroplanes going off, and it was set off for what was in the records as a gardening mission. So gardening, in shortcut terms, it was a way of just making sure everything had a code name. Gardening, which meant laying sea mines just outside the fjords, up around Denmark, Sweden, that way. And the idea is that if you fly low enough and drop in a mine, when it hits the surface at the right angle, it then sinks. If you hit it too low, it skims. If you hit it too high, it breaks. So there's got to be the right trajectory. To do that, I'll tell you in a minute about the heights that they were travelling. So that evening, just after sunset at 7:15, we've got all the records. So clear, windy conditions, but the crew of Lancaster, N for November, set off and reached their targets. The idea of dropping these bits of ordnance, they laid on the bottom of the fjords. Any submarines that were coming out from the U-boat pens, that metal going across a mine that's laying on the, eventually caused the mine to explode. That explosion, the idea was to break the back of any of the U-boats coming out. And those U-boats obviously were causing havoc at the time with the North Atlantic fleet coming across with supplies from the west. To drop the mines, they're not bombs, to drop the mines correctly, you are dropping them at about 400 feet, that's 120 meters-ish above the water. You are travelling to get the right trajectory at 180 miles an hour, and you are doing this after sunset. But at the same time as you're doing that, you've also got all the gun emplacements around that are defending it, firing at you. But if you go too high and too low, you've completely ruined the mission. You have to go back the next night, or the next night. So you try and get it right so that nobody else has to go and repeat the mission. The partner aircraft to this one landed at 1:41 in the morning. It had a badly damaged tail fin. N for November came in 15 minutes behind. N for November had been struck and damaged, and it had lost the power of one of its port engines. But when it came in for its final approach, the pilot was told to go round again because another aircraft was coming in from another mission that was more stricken. So taking those instructions, the pilot then flew off round again. These are copies of the actual documents for the RAF records that tell us about the gardening mission. We've also got there the details of the crews that took part. There's a lot of research that goes into any of these stories, and when you then start to put all the bits of that jigsaw together, you get an understanding as to it's an aircraft, but there's people involved, 7-man crew, and as long as you don't forget the fact that it's people, it is a nice aircraft, it's a beautiful aeroplane to see, but there are real life stories behind it. So you get the details of when they took off and when they landed. Some very, very detailed, good old RAF, proper detailed information. So as it came round for its final approach, it was told to nip round again. The other aircraft we know that was more stricken, that landed safely. When I say stricken, there were casualties on that plane, and other people then whisked straight off to be mended, repaired, so that they could get flying the next day. However, as it came round for its final approach to properly land, its circuit would certainly have taken it over where the crash, where the site is now, where we're going to be having this statue, where the stanchions are on the A46. But the windy conditions of that night were too much, and it's been reported that it lost another engine on its final turn in. The end result of that was that the plane then veered off to the right and crashed into Thirlby Top Wood, just short of the runway, and it was 5 minutes to 2 o'clock that morning. The crew of a Lancaster bomber normally consists of you've got the pilot, a flight engineer who also helps the pilot and can take over, the navigator, a wireless operator, a rear gunner, the mid gunner, and the bomb aimer, but the bomb aimer also doubled up as the front gunner. So when I mentioned that VNN crashed over 80 years ago, the human price to pay, we then have the detailed information of the crew. And just after the crash, if you have a look to the right hand side, they're either injured or K for killed. So out of the 7-man crew that night, 3 Australians, 2 of them were injured and 1 was killed. There's 2 Canadians, 1 injured and 1 was killed. And the 2 English RAF officers, both were killed. So for anybody to come out and survive that, a crash that takes you straight into the woods, it was low speed, it was coming in for its final approach, the amount of fuel in the plane, it was at the end of its flight, so everything was in its favour apart from the fact that it lost another engine. Now we bring it to life. The 22-year-old pilot was Sergeant Edward John Morley of the Australian Air Force. He was the one that was injured. The 22-year-old flight engineer, Sergeant Sid Garrett of the Royal Air Force, he was killed. The 22-year-old navigator, Flying Officer George Harrison of the Australian Air Force, was killed. 30-year-old bomb aimer, Sergeant Harry Mayle of the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, he was killed. The 21-year-old wireless operator, Sergeant John Dolby of the Australian Air Force, he was injured. The 24-year-old rear gunner, Sergeant James Gibbons of the Royal Canadian Air Force, was killed. And the 22-year-old mid-upper gunner, Sergeant Ian Fraser of the Royal Canadian Air Force, was injured. So the loss on that night from that particular plane was 4 of the 55,573 members of Bomber Command that were killed during the Second World War. And whilst that is a shocking number, is the fact that this represented more than half of the men and women who volunteered as Bomber Command crew. On Freedom's Wings is not just a memorial though to one particular aircraft. It is intended as a permanent reminder for all those that travel north between Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire of the part these counties played to try and secure the freedoms at the time. It is angled as if it's making its final approach. You can see with the model that's in the corner on with the Timmins sign, that is the angle that it is going to be seen from the A46. It's having to be designed though. You're seeing the box frame, there'll be more added to that. There's more curved bits to be put on and then curved bits onto those, so that when it's finally appearing on site, it will resemble a Lancaster bomber. But because it's high up on a hillside and it's a Lancaster bomber, it has lift. And this is currently a 75-ton structure behind me. It will be a 95-ton structure to 100 tons when it's completed. So it has to be designed to allow air to move within it and around it, so that 95 tons doesn't suddenly take off and end up the other side of the A46 in Collingham Churchyard. That would make front page news and get loads of donations in. So the design work that's gone into this, I am going to allow you at some stage to go and talk to Timmins, because there are some very clever people behind the scenes. If you imagine it starts off as just somebody's idea over 2 or 3 glasses of red wine, and then you've got to get people sitting down and designing how it's going to look, how you put the frames together. The jigsaw that you see behind me was reassembled yesterday. These parts, as they've been made and brought together, they then get sent out to parts of Lincolnshire. They get wrapped up in bubble wrap and then put inside a chicken shed the other side, because we need the storage. The people of Lincolnshire behind this project have been magnificent, donating their time, effort and space. And then yesterday, the experts within Timmins have brought it together. You can see how shiny the bolts are. This is the bloody biggest jigsaw I've ever seen. But there's more to add at a later stage. Going back to the personalities, whilst Sergeant Morley survived the crash, that's the chap. Again, bringing these things back to life rather than it just being metal. He survived the crash. He passed away in Queensland in Australia in 2011, aged 91. After the crash, the survivors were interviewed, separate rooms. They had to give their story as to what happened. There's 3 stories, they were all corroborated. He was then back on duty within 10 days, back flying, and then after 7 or 8 months he was then rested simply because it got too much for him. So that's the pilot, Sergeant John Morley. And the good news is there is finally over in Australia some permanent reminders of these chaps. Sergeant Ian Fraser, he was the air gunner. He was subsequently declared missing during another bombing mission over Berlin in January of 1943, and his body was never found. The 22-year-old navigator, Flying Officer George Harrison of the Australian Air Force, he was killed and buried in St Germain Churchyard in Thirlby, very close to the crash, 2.5 miles away from the crash site. The attached photographs show George's grave and the beautifully maintained churchyard containing over 60 other graves of RAF servicemen, not just those that died in 39 to 45, but also many of those that from the RAF that have passed away since. This is tough reading sometimes. To put all this information together, there is a lady that you need to hunt out, a lady called Di Ablewhite, and she's just one of those characters who, over 20 years of knowing her, has been the one that finds out, hears about a crash, starts to research it, starts ferreting for information, starts getting more detailed information, getting the RAF records, bringing it all together to then paint, not to paint, but to be able to then tell the story so that these guys aren't forgotten. I know that many, so in Nottinghamshire, I'm from Nottinghamshire, there are certain roads that you'll drive along, you'll find this huge memorial stone or some bent propellers and things like that, and you'll find a detailed rundown on how that crash, what happened that night, who the air crew were. And it's people like Di who spent hours and hours and hours researching. So whenever you pass by something, there's somebody behind the scenes that's put this information together. The 24-year-old air gunner, James Gibbons of the Canadian Air Force, he was killed, he was buried over in Newark. And Di visited his grave on the 80th anniversary, just to go and pay her respects. Public service and devotion to duty is probably an easy way, it's just loads of words. The way that we can make sure that this service has been acknowledged, and we're hoping to do with On Freedom's Wings, this statue, is going to be a visible and a permanent, long-lasting memorial for future generations. When the groundbreaking ceremony took place in 2018, we were lucky to have 8 RAF veterans with us at the time. And these included Johnny Johnson, or George Johnny Johnson is his official name. He was one of the bomb aimers who took place in the raid, the Dam Busters raid. You'll all have heard of that one, a very famous young man in his day, but lived to a ripe old age. He came along to the ground cutting ceremony, just one of the nicest chaps. And he was very keen to see this project completed. And then COVID came along, and then. So it's been a real struggle to get to this point where we are nearly there. The amount of hours that's gone into this, the paid hours where people have done their work for nothing. The concrete structure, the base to put these stands, people that have contracted to pay, and then at the end of it they've just written off the invoice because they want to see this project. This is Timmins, Monday to Friday, they're manufacturers, some good people in here, some lovely chaps. And then at Saturdays, when they're closed, people will come in and be doing this free of charge just to get this project. And when welders hear about this sort of project, they get in touch with Timmins and say, well, I've got my letters, I've got my certificates, can I help? There's a band of people that have put this thing together. Of those veterans that came to see the ground cutting ceremony, unfortunately a lot of those are no longer with us. We did promise them we'd get this installation in place. As a lasting memorial, there are 2 of those left. We need to see this up and running. The final bits that we need is this core 10 steel. That's a bit like the Angel of the North, that's got that orangey look to it, that rusty colour. There is about £50,000 worth of steel that needs to be purchased. So this, what started as a £750,000 project, then building material costs, then steel costs, and then. It's a really expensive project. We're down to just the last £50,000 that we need to raise. This isn't a fundraising day today, it's to celebrate all those that have had something to do with getting it to this stage. But any pennies, anything, if other people, friends and family want to donate, there is a website, you can't miss it. If you type in On Freedom's Wings, which is the name of the installation, you will find it. On Freedom's Wings, that is the final artist impression of what it's going to look like. An artist down in Bingham, I cajoled him and nudged him and just told him about this project. He's also had historic links to RAF as well. The artist put this painting together, which now we have the license for merchandise and things like that, for selling it. But again, he's done all this artwork and then he's gifted it so that the whole project does finally finish. we had a breakfast meeting up on site when we had the stanchions in place, just to show everybody at that stage how far we've got. I'm just going to show you a picture of two old chaps. And when I say old chaps, it was like listening to two 20-year-olds chatting. Because when you put two old boys like this together and step back, they were reminiscing. So the gentleman on the right is flight engineer Harry Parkins. He flew a whole tour in Lancaster bombers. A tour originally was 25 flights, then it became 30 because they didn't want to lose the experience. But it was an achievement to get to 25 flights. The gentleman on the left, that's Flight Sergeant James Flowers. And with his logbook, going back through the details, whilst VNN crashed in 1942, James Flowers actually flew in N for November. So he has a particular interest in seeing this thing actually finally onto its stanchions. So that's it, ladies and gents. What we have is On Freedom's Wings. It's a permanent reminder. The Angel of the North. Are any of you from the North? Are any of you linked to the Angel of the North in any way? Okay, so there's this great big thing that's just got wide wings that nobody really understands what it means. I don't. But when you go north between Newark and Lincoln, just entering Bomber County, on the right hand side you will see a Lancaster bomber full size, as if it's taking its final approach into Swindon. Just need that £50,000. So if you'd all like to dig deep. Ladies and gents, that's it. It's a few brief notes about a structure, but then the story behind it all. Thank you. Do go and chat though to the guys that have made it. Timmins on the far left hand side. An amazing crowd of people.
And this is what it's going to be, mounted at the side of the A46, A47. I'll put it in here which road it is, I've no idea. Some of you might have seen the stands have been up since 2019 off the side of the road, and it's going to go on. Bit more manageable at that size, I think. There we go.
No one might have an aircraft coming to the museum.
What?
I said we might have a half track coming to the museum.
Who?
Yeah.
Why? When? What?
I don't know any details apart from it'll be there. And I think
No comment. Give me half a story.
other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken, and I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. me once, dear, that you really love me, and no one else could come between. But now you've left me, and you love another. You have shattered all my dreams. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
So there you go, watchers. Been a good day, seen lots of stuff. Might be going to fly past a bit later as you're watching this, it'll be in the video. But yeah, so this you'll see, that's going to be in a video probably on Aidy's channel. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. Going on the Bristol Hercules at RAF Snaith Museum. So yeah, anyway, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'll leave links in the description to everybody we've seen today. And support the guys who are putting up this wonderful piece of engineering. And see you next week.